think we have a complete disregard for our environment.
Water's drying up, which is kind of silly because it rains all the time everywhere.
35 to 38% of the greenhouse gases are produced by just 5 materials.
सरकार हमेशा बहुत अच्छी स्कीम्स लाता है बट वो लोगों तक नहीं पहुंचती है.
There's so much research around solutions, so where is that gap?
We have found more than 25 ways of building earthquake-safe buildings without using cement.
What will people pay for? People will pay for design.
We thought of coming up with a model solution that can be easily replicated.
With analytical tools available, it really makes sense to use data to optimize design.
We're facing a climate emergency, but it's not irreversible if we act swiftly and decisively.
I wanted to build an Uber for waste. Every bit of waste is a resource.
The footprint of this project is hardly 20% of the entire site because the unbuilt is as important as the built.
Very quickly, I learned that the person making the big decisions was the person who is controlling the money.
I think adaptive comfort has to come back into picture.
You have to talk to the people. If you want the project to reach somewhere, you have to involve them in the process.
अगर कोई बहन एम्पावर हुई तो वो बेनिफिट पूरे एंटायर फैमिली को मिलेगा.
Tiling industry is massive. Even if you change 10% of it, there's a huge carbon emission saving that we would do.
Now, this is suddenly sustainability that is offered not at a premium.
Disruption can bring the world to its knees, but it can also breed innovation. By 2030, there'll be 43 cities across the globe with a population of 10 million people or more. That's up from just 10 such cities about 3 decades ago. To accommodate this massive influx of people, we need a large volume of new housing, schools, factories, and more. But with limited time, capital, and land, we need cost-effective solutions that are quick to construct, easy to replicate, and most importantly, solutions that lend themselves to adaptation. That's what we're discussing today with Avnish Tiwari, founder of At Architecture, a Mumbai-based practice that is taking this challenge head-on with a slew of award-winning projects from Russia to Cambodia. So Avnish, what I want to start with today is this project I just referred to in my introduction, which is a 3,000-unit residential development in Cambodia that won you the United Nations Development Programme competition. Who were you designing for? What was the brief like? And how were you able to ensure that this project or your proposal was, in fact, scalable?
So for this project in Cambodia, the key requirements were affordability and security for factory workers, with 2/3 of them being women migrants. The project is a part of Phnom Penh SEZ. While designing this, we thought of coming up with a model solution so that the project can be easily replicated, scaled, and can be appropriated to similar context. So we, at a master plan level, we wanted to create a cluster or a module which has certain collective facilities. The clusters are developed as a self-sufficient unit. When these units are repeated, these clusters infrastructure also gets scaled or repeated.
So you spoke about there are these twin objectives that you set for yourself, which is number one, affordability, number two, security. So let's go one by one. The first thing is affordability. How do you create affordability?
In terms of cost efficiency, there are two main aspects. One is the geometry of the layout. We tried to have zero offsets in the layout, developed a cluster which is very compact. Most of the walls and structural members are shared between the apartments. The structural part, in terms of structural efficiency, we came up with the idea of composite structure, which is a mix of RCC frame structure plus load-bearing walls, which is made from the locally available clay bricks.
And even internally, you're designing these apartments. So are they flexible layout?
So if you look at the layout, there is a specific zone of living and the utility wet
Mhm.
areas.
Mhm.
So wet areas contains all the services together, which also has a kitchen, pantry, everything. And on the living areas, you have series of living room, bedroom, living room, bedroom. So in terms of flexibility, it is very open. All the structural members are only in the periphery,
Mhm.
and in between there is only one column which actually can be easily aligned with a cabinet or a storage.
Mhm.
So it can be converted into a dorm or an apartment for a family.
Now, specifically for the user group that you were designing for, was there something specifically that you did in terms of, creating more secure or inclusive environment?
I think this was the main challenge.
Mhm.
Affordability and sustainability was given, but this is something that we extracted from the brief,
Mhm.
from our understanding. So for safety, came up with the idea of series of codes which facilitates interaction amongst users and between each apartment.
Mhm.
We have two set of courtyards. One is a larger courtyard which we call community courtyard, which is enjoyed by all the living spaces of the apartment, living rooms and bedrooms. And on the other side of each apartment, there is a smaller courtyard which is
Mhm.
called utility courtyard, which is shared by all the wet areas and service areas like pantry and toilets, and this also becomes an entrance to each apartment. We came up with the idea of kitchen gardens,
Mhm.
which become part of this utility courtyard, and the inspiration came from our study in Cambodia from their households. There we
Mhm.
found how much ever small it is, but they generally have a small kitchen garden in front of their house apartment.
So you also did a very similar project in Russia. Now, when you move from this context, of the global Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Cambodia example can actually be replicated in such climates. But then, when you move to Russia, what are the different challenges and requirements that you're building for?
The climate is something which directs how people live as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
So their living pattern was totally different from the ones who were for whom we were designing in Cambodia or
Mhm.
in Asia. We wanted to give them openings on the facade, but at the same time we wanted them to also enjoy a space which is outside, which is also a very common culture in Russia. And this is where the idea of sunrooms came in. We thought of designing a series of balconies which are not only single height stacked on top of each other. Instead, they all are at least double height or 3 floors, so that the opening is higher, and it also allows for deeper sun to penetrate into an apartment.
Which is also a great sort of exercise where you can then limit the amount of energy that people have to consume to heat up their homes, because the sun then actually penetrates deeper into the house.
Yeah, that was the main idea behind doing this. But there's one commonality between Cambodia and Russia housing. We both these structures were very compact. If you want to cool down your place, or if you want to keep the heat intact, it's ideal to have a cluster which is like very compact. So that is what worked in both of these projects for us in a way. And also the orientation. In Cambodia, we have oriented each apartment with no east and west exposure. But over here, we have east and west exposure, so that there is more sun exposure to the facade of an apartment.
I think another interesting thing that I noted is that while you have a composite structural system in Cambodia, what you're using in Russia is concrete. Right now, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, why are you using so much concrete? And you want to create a sustainable and affordable sort of proposals. How do you reconcile, concrete with all of that?
Every structural system that we propose for a project, it arises from the requirements themselves. For Cambodia, it was low scale, it was maximum 4-story, but there also we could not go with completely load bearing. We had to use the composite of frame and the load bearing walls. Whereas in Russia, most of the units were actually high rise. And if you go higher, your structural members go on becoming bigger and bigger. If you are making a high rise building out of concrete, these concrete walls can become a shear wall, and they can become a load bearing structure themselves. And concrete also, as compared to mud or brick, requires very less footprint to contain to carry same amount of load. So these were the two main things. And there's another very important thing. The thermal mass of concrete is also very high, so it retains heat. So if you make completely concrete structure in Asian countries or tropical climate, if it is exposed to sun, it will trap heat and it will retain it and it will emit it in the night time when it gets cooler. But this is what we want in Russia. So we wanted this concrete to contain as much heat as possible. So thermal mass, structural stability, and the strength made us take a decision of concrete.
So I think what you mentioned in the Cambodia project, which is this idea of the kitchen gardens and how it's inspired by what you saw in typical conventional sort of living systems that you saw there. I think that's a thread that also then comes in because yes, sustainability requires scalability, and that requires solutions be generic enough that they can actually be replicated. But you also want to ensure that there's some level of joy and delight that comes depending on who is using it. And I think with this orphanage that you designed in Thane, that actually comes across really, really beautifully.
So for us, I think for our practice and the way our practice is evolving, we have realized that there are three main aspects for which we design any project. Of course, the efficiency is there, one very important thing in each of the projects. Second is sustainability, and third is delight that you bring in through your design. And that can be achieved by making something which is aesthetically pleasant. And for home for marginalized children in Thane, there was not enough play for us to work out anything which is totally new. Being a part of high density slum, we had to make sure that each and every square feet of the site is utilized for the purpose, for the function. But at the same time, we also were trying to create something which is more interactive, playful for the age group of 3 to 14 years old. Again, in terms of orientation, we had 3 sides open. The only play that we had was the overhang of the window chhajja, the weather shade of a window. And these windows we have started articulating and made it into a recreational space just by molding chhajjas in different shapes and forms. And they also become functional spaces for kids. For example, they could become a desk for them to study. They also become a stairway, shortcut for kids to go from one floor to another, because it has got series of levels which can be navigated through different ways. And on the southern side, we came up with the idea of making green wall first, but then we realized the budget is so tight. But then we converted the same green wall into a nursery, which will be grown by kids as a vocational training. And the client found out that the amount of revenue that is generated from this nursery was enough to look at the upkeep of the entire structure. We also had to create a system or a facade, a terracotta louver, in which you are also able to access these plants, but at the same time you are also able to shut your window.
I think that also then leads to another project that you've done, from this dense, slum type environment in a dense city to a very remote environment in Meghalaya. Again, you're working with very similar tenets, which is how do you use architecture as a tool for creating economic opportunities? So how did you actually get involved in this?
After winning a UNDP project in Cambodia, we were fortunate that one of the veterans, army veteran, got in touch, not for the jackfruit processing unit, but for another project. He wanted us to make affordable housing similar to what we have proposed in Cambodia, in Meghalaya. That project did not work out, but we stayed in touch, and then eventually he got this project, which is run by a cooperative of 50 farmers.
What is the brief here? Like, who are you designing for? What is the need of this project?
The primary requirement of this project was to process jackfruits. In Garo Hills itself, around 100,000 metric tons of jackfruit gets wasted every season because of the lack of infrastructure. And the shelf life of jackfruits are also very less, like it cannot be transported. So it's ideal to process them so that the life increases. And this is how the program derived.
So what were the unique sort of requirements that this presented in terms of who was going to use these buildings?
The project belongs to the cooperative of 50 farmers who came together, and they are the one who are building it, and they are the one who will be processing it and running it along with the Anand Foundation. The brief given to us was just a plant, just a factory of 4,000 square feet with certain amount which was funded by the government. Through our interactions with the users, villagers there, we realized that they need an infrastructure to process this, but at the same time the site is so remotely located, there is no infrastructure at all in times of disasters. And the day when we visited, at that time also we found out that there was a flood, like major flood happened just before we arrived, and the only existing bridge along one river very close to the site got washed away in the flood. These things actually started directing us about our approach to the project. So, and also it happened to be that our site was low lying already. We had to make a structure which was little raised on a plinth, and we also wanted to create an infrastructure which caters to this village and neighboring communities in times of disaster. So along with making the processing unit, we also came up with the idea of proposing a dedicated community space which will remain open 24/7 without disturbing the access to the factory.
So more recently, you achieved a lot of recognition for your work on the Northeast Pavilion that you designed for the Surajkund Crafts Mela. And it highlights another very interesting thread in your practice, which is you're trying to promote certain ideas to the larger mass of people, more sustainable ways of living, more ways of engaging with the natural world, and hopefully then preserving it.
There is not one single solution or one single material which we can call as a sustainable and which will work for everywhere. So every site, every program demands certain response or certain solution. So this is what we try to achieve through our projects. Whatever project we get, we try to find these narratives which comes from the site itself, from the user, from the program. Particularly with the project Bamboo Pavilion in Surajkund, there we were not only asked to make an architecture like a structure, but we were also responsible to curate the art form of Northeast. So to start with, we thought of, first of all, the architecture itself should represent the craft of the Northeastern region. And as we all know that bamboo is very traditional, and you will find almost in every state, all the 8 states of Northeast having bamboo dwellings. So the architecture itself becomes the representation of the craft that they have. And the second thing that we did through this project was we created different galleries where we bring artisans from all these states, tribal artisans, to demonstrate their life to the people. And these two things, first also brings the bamboo in a mainstream, and also at the same time these indigenous artisans, craft people were able to travel and display their work. So it was also a conservation of an art form which is slowly dying in our northeastern states.
I think what you did very similarly was in this Guwahati project that on the riverfront, and there's rejuvenation of a lake. Again, it seems like you're trying to promote a certain way of living and of engaging with between humans and between nature.
Yeah, absolutely. In Pavilion project, we connected visitors and people with the artisans and as well as nature. Here we were able to connect people with the water and the beautiful landscape present along the edge of the Brahmaputra river. When the brief came, we were asked to create a landscape, but we were also asked to create a very big promenade overhanging onto Brahmaputra river edge. And our site is at around 10 to 12 meters above the river level. So we tried to come up with an idea where you extend yourself towards the river, but at the same time you stay grounded. So we followed the edge, the riparian edge, and we slowly created pockets and terraces which takes you closer to the river. For this project particularly, we thought of having least amount of construction, The construction is limited only to circulation, and we have created series of step pavilions which connects people with the water. In a very tight urban dense neighborhood, this has become like a breathing space for the residents as well as the visitors. The other important thing that we did is we tried to preserve everything that was there. We tried to revive the native flora as well as fauna through horticulture. When we visited the site for the first time, we realized like there was a beautiful lily pond, but there were very few butterflies around. So our horticulture landscape detail actually involves all these. It is more of a conservation of a nature, we can say, and bringing back the native landscape.
So I think now as we end, I want to sort of bring up, this the way that you've practiced. It's been driven by and it's been fueled by your participation in international competitions. That couldn't have been easy, right? So how has that journey been, and what do you foresee for yourself and for the practice in the future?
When we began our practice, we struggled a lot, like every other architect. So the culture of competition is not very healthy, and most of the competitions are generally invited, and they don't encourage young practices. So this leaves us with very handful number of competitions, which are open for everyone. We also look for a competition which sounds interesting, which has potential of getting converted into a project that is commissioned to the winner. I think to encourage young practices, there should be more such open competitions where they are allowed to participate, showcase their merits and skills. And if they are really concerned about getting the project built by an established practice, they can collaborate with a practice which is local, which is established, which has enough infrastructure to showcase.
So thank you so much, Avnish, for sitting down with us today and for this amazing conversation.
Pleasure, Sunit. Thanks for having me.
As our cities gear up for 2.5 billion more people by 2050, our conversation today highlights how we must not look at this challenge through the prism of numbers alone. Our world is highly diverse, and Add Architecture's work demonstrates beautifully how it's not just about designing solutions that are scalable. It's also about remembering the varied needs and aspirations of the people we serve.